Some stories don't begin with action. They begin with a feeling that something isn't right. It had been a week since we found the cave, but I couldn't forget it. Not the lake, not the sound, not the map, and definitely not the feeling that something was still there. Watching, waiting. That morning I wasn't alone anymore. 3 men stood outside my cabin. Old friends. Men I trusted. Men who had worked the mountains before. There was Samuel, quiet, sharp-eyed, always thinking ahead. There was Daniel, strong, practical, never afraid of hard terrain. And there was Ethan, the youngest, but curious, sometimes too curious. Rusty stood beside me, watching them carefully. Dogs always know. They don't trust easily. And neither did I. We're really doing this? Samuel asked, looking at the map. I nodded. We're going back to the cave. No one smiled, because none of us felt excited. We felt something else. Something heavier. We packed properly this time. Ropes, extra lamps, climbing gear, food. And for the first time in years we carried weapons. Not for animals, but for something we couldn't explain. The forest felt different that day. Not dangerous, not loud, just watching. We followed the same trail, past the fallen trees, past the narrow paths, past the place where Rusty had fallen into the pit. He stopped there for a moment, sniffed the ground, then moved on. Hours passed. The sun was already lowering when we finally reached the rock wall. The cave. It looked the same, dark, silent, waiting. But something was different. Samuel raised his hand. Wait. We all stopped. He pointed toward the ground. Footprints. Fresh ones. Not old. Not washed away. New. Daniel crouched down. These aren't from days ago, he said quietly. These are recent. My chest tightened. We're not alone, Ethan whispered. Rusty growled softly. Low. Warning. Then we heard it. A faint metallic sound. From inside the cave. Not water. Not rock. Metal. We quickly moved behind a large stone formation. Carefully. Quietly. I slowly leaned forward and looked toward the cave entrance. And that's when I saw them. Men. Not 1. Not 2. At least 4. Maybe more inside. They were not like us. They didn't look like prospectors. Their clothing was different. Dark. Uniform. Practical. One of them carried something heavy. Another held equipment I didn't recognize. And one had a weapon. Not for hunting. Not for survival. Something else. I slowly pulled back behind the rocks. My heart was beating harder now. This isn't normal, Samuel whispered. No, I said quietly. This is something else. Ethan leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better look. Daniel pulled him back. Don't. We stayed hidden. Watching. Waiting. The men moved with purpose. Like they knew exactly where they were going. They weren't searching. They were working. At one point, one of them pointed deeper into the cave. Another man nodded. Then they carried equipment inside. No one spoke for a long moment. What do you think they're doing? Ethan whispered. No one answered. Because none of us knew. But one thing was clear. The cave wasn't empty. And whatever was inside that mountain, someone else already knew about it. Rusty suddenly tensed. His ears raised. He looked directly toward the cave. One of the men paused. For a second it felt like he was looking straight at us. No one moved. No one breathed. Then he turned away. Only after several minutes did we slowly begin to move back. Carefully. Step by step. Not making a sound. When we were finally far enough from the cave, Ethan spoke first. We should go back. Daniel nodded. Next time we come prepared. Samuel looked at me. What do you think? I didn't answer right away. I looked back toward the mountains. Toward the cave. Toward the place that had already taken too much. Then I said quietly, we're not ready for this. That night, back at the cabin, no one slept well. The fire burned low. Rusty stayed awake longer than usual. Watching the door. Listening. I sat at the table, looking at the map again. But now the map felt different. Heavier. This wasn't about gold anymore. This wasn't even about the cave. This was about something hidden, something important, something that other men were willing to guard. And the most dangerous part wasn't what we saw. It was what we didn't see. Samuel finally spoke from the corner of the room. "We need to know what's inside." Daniel nodded. "But if we're wrong, it could cost us." Ethan looked at me. "So what do we do?" I looked at Rusty, then at the map, then at the fire, and I said, "We wait. Next time we watch first." Because in the mountains, the biggest mistake a man can make is walking straight into a mystery without understanding who else is already inside it. And something told me this cave was no longer just a secret of the mountains. It was something far more dangerous. The fire was still burning low inside the cabin. The shadows moved slowly along the wooden walls. Rusty wasn't sleeping. Not really. He lay near the door, but his head was up. Ears alert. Eyes open. Watching. I sat at the table, staring at the map. Samuel and Daniel were resting. Ethan pretended to sleep. But I could tell none of us were at peace. Then it happened. Rusty stood up. Slowly. No barking. No sudden movement. Just stillness. "Rusty?" I whispered. He took a step toward the door. Then another. And then he froze. A sound. Outside. Not loud. Not clear. But real. A step. On gravel. Every muscle in my body tightened. I slowly reached for the lantern. Lowered the flame. The cabin grew darker. Samuel opened his eyes immediately. He had heard it too. Daniel sat up quietly. Ethan didn't move. No one spoke. Another sound. Closer. Someone was outside. Rusty let out a low growl. Deep. Controlled. That wasn't fear. That was warning. I stood up slowly. Walked toward the window. Careful not to make a sound. And then I saw it. A shadow. Moving past the trees. Not an animal. Too tall. Too steady. A man. I stepped back immediately. "They found us," I whispered. Samuel's face changed instantly. "Are you sure?" I nodded. Daniel quietly reached for his weapon. Ethan finally sat up. "What's going on?" "No noise," Samuel said. "Not yet." We waited. Minutes passed. Felt like hours. Then a second shadow. And then a third. They weren't just passing through. They were watching. Rusty moved closer to me. His body tense. Ready. Then suddenly, a faint light flashed between the trees. A flashlight. They were searching. My heart started pounding. Samuel leaned closer. "They tracked us from the cave." Daniel nodded. "They know we saw them." Ethan whispered. "What do we do?" I looked at the door. Then at the back window. Then at Rusty. And I made a decision. We don't wait. We move. Quietly. Quickly. We gathered only what we needed. No heavy gear. No noise. Samuel opened the back door slowly. The cold night air rushed in. We stepped into the darkness. The forest at night is different. It doesn't forgive mistakes. We moved fast, but silent. Behind us the cabin stood still. Firelight glowing inside. Like a trap. We didn't go toward the river. We went uphill. Into the trees. Harder path. But safer. After several minutes we stopped. Listened. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. Just wind. Ethan let out a breath. "I think we lost them." Samuel didn't answer. Because then Rusty growled again. We all turned. Far below between the trees we saw lights. Moving. Toward the cabin. "They're there," Daniel said. We watched in silence. The lights reached the house. One of the men entered. Another walked around the outside. Searching. Looking. For us. My chest tightened. "They weren't just watching," I said quietly. "They were hunting." Ethan swallowed hard. "What if we stayed?" No one answered. Because we all knew. That would have been the end. The lights stayed there for a long time. Too long. They weren't leaving quickly. Which meant one thing. They weren't afraid. Samuel spoke quietly. "This isn't just about the cave." Daniel nodded. "They're protecting something." I looked toward the mountain. Toward the cave. Toward the place we had found. No, I said slowly. They're hiding something. Rusty sat beside me, still watching, still alert. The night grew colder. And that's when I understood something. We had crossed a line. We were no longer just explorers. We were now part of something dangerous, something hidden. And whatever was inside that cave was important enough for men like that to hunt anyone who got too close. I looked at Samuel. We don't go back tomorrow. He nodded. Daniel asked. Then when? I looked back at the distant lights near the cabin. Then at the dark mountain. And I said quietly, we watch first. From a distance. Next time we see everything. And we make sure they never see us. The night was getting colder. The lights near the cabin were still moving. Too slow. Too careful. Like they were searching for something they refused to leave behind. We stayed hidden high in the trees. Not moving. Not speaking. Rusty suddenly shifted beside me. His body stiffened. Then a low growl. Easy, I whispered. But it was too late. Rusty let out a short bark. Not loud. But in the silence of the mountains it sounded like a gunshot. Everything froze. Below us the lights stopped moving. One of the men turned. Another raised his flashlight. Then the beam cut through the trees. Searching. They heard that. Ethan whispered. Move, Samuel said immediately. No hesitation. We turned and moved deeper into the forest. Faster now. No more waiting. Branches snapped under our feet. The darkness closed in around us. Behind us, voices. Low. Sharp. They were talking. And then running. They're coming, Daniel said. Rusty ran ahead, then stopped, looking back at us. As if guiding. We followed him. Down a narrow slope. Between rocks. Through thick trees. My breath burned in my chest. My legs felt heavy. But we couldn't stop. Then suddenly Rusty froze. Not fear. Something else. He wasn't looking behind us. He was looking ahead. And then we heard it. Another sound. From the darkness in front of us. Not the same men. Different. Slower. Closer. Samuel raised his hand. Stop. We dropped low behind a fallen tree. Then, a shadow moved between the trees ahead. Not one. Two. Maybe more. They weren't holding flashlights. They moved quietly. Too quietly. Who are they? Ethan whispered. No one answered. Because this didn't make sense. The men at the cabin were behind us. But now someone else was in front. Rusty let out a low, deep growl. The kind he only makes when something is wrong. Very wrong. I slowly realized something. We weren't being chased by one group. We were between two. Left, I whispered. Daniel nodded. We moved quietly, carefully, trying not to make a sound. But the forest betrayed us. A branch snapped. Loud. Too loud. The shadows ahead stopped. Then turned. And in that moment, a faint light flashed. Not a flashlight. Something smaller. Like a signal. They see us, Samuel said. Run. This time we didn't hold back. We ran. Through trees. Through rocks. Through darkness. Behind us, movement. Fast. Both sides now. Voices. Steps. Rusty stayed close. Never leaving. We reached a steep drop. A narrow path leading down. No choice, Daniel said. We went down. Sliding. Falling. Grabbing branches. At the bottom, a stream. Fast. Cold. Through the water, I said. Samuel understood immediately. Tracks disappear. We stepped into the freezing stream. The water hit like ice. But we moved through it. Walking inside the current. Minutes passed. Then finally we climbed out. No voices. No lights. No footsteps. Only the sound of water. We kept moving. Far. Farther. Until finally we stopped. No one spoke. No one needed to. We were alive. But something had changed. Ethan was the first to speak. Those weren't the same men, no, Samuel said. Daniel looked back into the darkness. There are more of them. I stood there, breathing slowly, trying to understand. The cave. The map. The lake. This was bigger than we thought. Much bigger. Rusty came and sat beside me, still alert, still watching. I looked at the mountain, hidden in darkness now, and I said quietly, "We're not the only ones looking for that cave. And whatever is inside it, people are willing to hunt for it." I paused, then added, "And kill for it." The wind moved through the trees, cold, sharp, and for the first time I felt something stronger than curiosity. Fear. Real fear. But one thing was certain now. We couldn't walk away, because whatever was hidden inside that mountain was already watching us back. They didn't return to the cabin that night. Not immediately. We stayed deep in the forest. Hidden. Silent. Watching. The mountain no longer felt like home. Felt like a trap. By morning we were exhausted. Cold. Hungry. But alive. Samuel spoke first. "We can't stay here." Daniel nodded. "They know where the cabin is." Ethan looked at me. "So what now?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was simple. We had two choices. Go back to the cave, and face whatever was waiting there. Or leave. Walk away. Go back to the city. Stay alive. Rusty stood beside me. Quiet. Waiting. I looked toward the mountains, then said slowly, "We go back. Not to the cave. To the cabin." We needed supplies. Food. Gear. The map. We moved carefully, taking a longer path, avoiding open ground. By the time we reached the ridge above the cabin, the sun was already low. We stopped, and what we saw changed everything. Smoke. Thick. Dark. Rising into the sky. "No," Ethan whispered. We ran. Down the slope. Through the trees. Faster. Faster. And then we saw it. The cabin. Burning. Flames had already taken most of it. The roof collapsing. The fire roaring. Rusty barked loudly. "No!" I shouted. I moved forward, but Samuel grabbed my arm. "Too late," he said. Daniel looked around. They did this. Not an accident. A message. Ethan stared at the fire. "They want us gone." I stood there, watching everything I had built turn to ash. Years of life. Gone. In minutes. Rusty stood beside me, whining softly. Then Samuel said something quietly. "They're not just protecting the cave. They're erasing it." Silence. The fire cracked loudly. And in that moment, everything became clear. This wasn't about gold. This was something else. Something hidden. Something dangerous. Something worth burning a man's life to keep secret. Daniel turned to me. "We can't stay here." Ethan nodded. "They'll come back." Samuel added. "And next time, they won't just burn the house." I looked at the fire, then at the mountain, and finally said, "We leave. We go to the city, not to run, but to prepare, to understand, to come back ready." Rusty walked closer, pressed against my leg. I placed my hand on his head. "This isn't over," I said quietly. "Not even close." The fire continued to burn behind us. And as we turned away, I knew one thing. The mountain had taken my home, but it had given me something else. A mystery. And now, a reason to return. The fire was still burning behind us. The sound of cracking would echoed in the cold evening air. Smoke slowly rose into the darkening sky. None of us spoke for a long time. There are moments in life when words don't help. This was one of them. I stood there, staring at what was left of my home. Years of work. Years of memories. Gone. But something inside me didn't break. Instead, something else appeared. The thought. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I exhaled slowly. "Not everything is gone," I said quietly. Samuel looked at me. Daniel frowned slightly. Ethan didn't understand. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small piece of gold. Let it catch the last light of the fire. "I never kept everything in one place," I said. The others looked at me more closely now. "In the mountains," I continued, "you learn something very important. You never trust one place with everything you have." Daniel nodded slowly. Samuel's expression changed. "I hid it," I said. "Not here. Not in the cabin. somewhere else. The wind moved through the trees. Rusty stood beside me. Quiet. Faithful. Ethan stepped closer. How much? He asked. I gave a small smile. Enough, I said. Enough to keep us going. A silence followed. But this time felt different. Not empty. Hopeful. I looked at each of them. I didn't tell you before, I said. Not because I didn't trust you, but because in these mountains, the less people know, the safer everyone is. Samuel nodded. He understood. Daniel crossed his arms, then gave a short, firm nod. Ethan let out a breath. Half relief, half disbelief. I stepped closer to them. If we make it through this, everything I have, we share. No hesitation. No secrets between us. The fire cracked loudly behind us. Samuel looked at me. Then we're in this together. Daniel. Until the end. Ethan smiled slightly. I'm not going anywhere. Rusty wagged his tail once. I looked back at the fire one last time. The cabin was gone. But we weren't. And more importantly, our story wasn't over. The mountains had taken something from me. But they hadn't taken everything. And as long as something remains, there is always a way forward. I turned toward the dark path ahead. Let's go, I said quietly. And together, we walked away from the fire. Not as men who had lost everything, but as men who still had something left to fight for.